From tropical Hawaiian pathways skirting ancient ruins, where it's told creatures straight from island lore roam, to treks through the deep dark forests of West Virginia that are wandered by restless spirits resulting from tragic accidents long since past. Are you ready to brave our fourth list of some of the most chillingly haunted hikes in the United States? Number 5. The St. Joe National Forest. The St. Joe National Forest, split between Shoshone, Latah, Clearwater, and Kanawha counties on the Idaho Panhandle, is a United States national woodland expanse that acts as one of 3 such expanses that comprise the Idaho Panhandle National Forests. Historically, through the 19th century, settlers would begin arriving to the area. In 1888, the St. Joe Post Office was established just off the banks of the St. Joe River, and in 1908, St. Joe National Park was formalized in an effort to preserve the area's heavily logged forests. Sadly, the Great Fire of 1910 would ravage parts of Idaho and Montana, while burning around 3 million acres, killing roughly 86, destroying an undocumented number of structures, and literally deleting a handful of communities from the map. In 1973, the Forest Service would consolidate the St. Joe, the Kaniksu, and the Coeur d'Alene National Forests under the administrative title of Idaho Panhandle National Forests. In the present, and more than a century following, damages from the 1910 blaze are still visible across forest lands, which offer a range of popular trails, water recreation sites, and options in angling, camping, and more. Through the duration of its usage, St. Joe has been connected to a range of ghost stories and local legends. Within park bounds, just off of the White Pine National Recreation Trail, lies Heller Creek Campground, which is placed adjacent to the gravesite of one Frank A. Heller. According to the plaque near his marker, Frank was a prospector who arrived to the area in 1909 that perished within his cabin in the harsh winter of 1936. Sadly, it's told his body was not discovered until spring, when it was buried by the Forest Service official who located it, and to date, many camping near have reported the sounds of disembodied footsteps around their tents through the night, instances of items found in odd locations, and encounters with the spectral manifestation of Frank himself, who's usually either sighted in his cabin or walking about the surrounding area. Lastly, near the river, several hikers have described hearing blood-curdling screams that some attribute to the souls of those lost in rafting accidents, while others frequenting the forest have told of orbs visible to the naked eye and bestial noises from creatures that even experts can't identify. Number 4. The North Bend Rail Trail. The North Bend Rail Trail is a 72-mile path following one of the most distinguished railroad lines in U.S. history that cuts through north central and western West Virginia, and that runs parallel to U.S. Route 50, extending from the community of Wolf Summit at its eastern end to I-77 near Parkersburg at its western end. Historically chartered in 1851, this 103-mile segment of rail line was plotted from Grafton to Parkersburg in West Virginia, and following its completion on May 1st of 1857, it was sold to the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, after which it was recognized as the B&O Parkersburg branch. The Parkersburg branch, which was constructed with 23 tunnels and 52 bridges to minimize curvature and incline, would accommodate both freight and even passenger services under B&O for a time. However, in 1971, the company would finally turn the line over to Amtrak. By 1981, freight services had slowed to a crawl, and over the following decade, portions of the line were abandoned entirely, with some dismantled after their closure. Through the late 1980s, the old line was sold to the state, with some early segments of the trail opening to hikers by 1991. Over the following years, additional portions would be completed, and in 1996, the state would go on to purchase the remaining 71 miles of rail line. In recent years, the North Bend Rail Trail has earned its place amongst some of the most popular hikes in the Appalachians, and is revered for its mountainous scenery and unique tunnels, as it is infamous for its purported paranormal activity, with those braving its length reporting strange floating lights spied bobbing along the path, orbs in the backgrounds of photography and videos, and phantom train whistles heard echoing through the region. One popular legend surrounding Eaton Tunnel, also recognized as Original Tunnel Number 21, tells that in 1963, 3 men were killed in a rock slide while working on the passage, after which a second tunnel was constructed in its stead, and those nearing this site have told of ghostly moaning and voices heard from deep within the earth, of the disembodied chatter of a group of men talking amongst themselves emanating from somewhere out of sight, and even of the disturbing sound of a woman's voice heard crying out, "Help me!" Another popular fable surrounding the Silver Run Tunnel, or Tunnel Number 19, which is 1,376 feet in length and seemingly always damp and foggy, tells that a bride who was riding aboard a train with her groom either fell or was pushed within the passage and died instantly. Into more recent times, those braving the dements have told of sightings of a chilling woman in white that appears so real that while the stretch was still in use, several engineers who drove straight through her actually panicked and went for help thinking they'd hit someone, only to find their train clear and no sign of impact. Number 3. The Youghiogheny River Trail. The Yough River Trail is a non-motorized multi-use rail trail stretching 71 miles from McKeesport to Confluence in Pennsylvania that acts as a portion of the much larger trail recognized as the Great Allegheny Passage, which connects Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to Washington, D.C. Historically, circa 1855, the first railroad plotted through the area would change the river's appearance drastically, and in the late 1800s, as the Youghiogheny River Valley became a hub for the nation's industry, a number of additional lines would be laid adjacent and over the Great Flow. Through the years, the glows from coke ovens and coal mines would dot the surrounding landscape, with railroads lining both sides of the current. All the while, the region's population would boom, and communities would form along the river's edge. By the 1930s, however, Youghioghany's coke ovens would cool, and as the rail business began to dwindle, through the 1980s, the line on the west side of the river was closed down, after which it would be acquired by the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy and sold to the state, who would reopen it to the public as a panoramic trail in 1986. In the present, the Youghiogheny River Trail is appropriate for all ages and is even accessible to disabilities, with the site offering rental bicycles and options in hiking, jogging, cross-country, designated campsites, and, according to local lore, a range of chilling hauntings, with those frequenting the expanse reporting orbs and half-formed figures captured in photography, disembodied voices and footsteps heard from empty spaces, a phantom light not dissimilar to that of a train spied flying down the old route, and encounters with apparitions and spectral silhouettes across the trail's length, especially after dark. At the location now referred to as Dead Man's Hollow, which consists of the remains of an old industrial plant that burned to the ground in 1924 and that's now contained within a nature preserve. It's told that no less than 4 fatalities occurred on site, and those who have braved its bounds have described the sounds of someone unseen shuffling about, as well as disturbing run-ins with a male entity usually sighted hanging from a tree. The half-acre Dravo Cemetery, formerly the Newland Family Cemetery, plays host to around 708 grave sites, only about 81 of which are still identifiable, 9 that belong to veterans of the Civil War, and even one plot that holds the remains of a veteran of the War of 1812. The Dravo Methodist Church, which was constructed in 1824 right in front of the cemetery, actually burned down twice due to sparks from passing trains, and following its second razing in 1920 was not reconstructed. Near the entirety of the area, many have described a phantom train whistle heard on the winds, encounters with ghostly figures from the past, and even several run-ins with a terrifying two-headed dog. Number 2. The Aiea Loop Trail. Aiea Loop Trail is a 4.8-mile path cutting through the 384-acre Kea'iwa Heiau State Recreation Area at the summit of Aiea Heights on Oahu in Hawaii. This recreation area preserves the ruins of an old healing temple, which many visit for its spiritual mending qualities up into modern times. Historically, this temple was constructed sometime through the 16th century under Kea'iwa, a chief ruler of Oahu, and its 100 by 160 foot expanse would be graced by walls around 4 feet in height and 5 feet in width. At this temple, a kahuna, or expert priest who specialized in healing, would diagnose and attempt to treat various injuries and ailments, and would also train students in la'u, or a form of healing utilizing fasting, medicine, and prayer. On May 5th of 1944, a B-24J Liberator bomber would wreck right into the ridge of Pu'u'ua, and upon impact would catch fire, resulting in the deaths of all 10 crew members aboard. Afterwards, this crash site and associated remains would go undiscovered. Through World War II, the heiau was damaged heavily as soldiers utilized its stones to build a road, and in 1951, it was rededicated in an effort to re-establish the historical setting via a trail for visitors laden with various medicinal plants. In 1993, the crash site of the old bomber was finally uncovered, its bodies given proper burials, and in 2008, a memorial plaque was erected at the nearest trailhead. The Aiea Loop Trail remains a popular hike amongst locals and tourists to this day, and along with adjacent temple ruins, offers a range of native and replanted flora, the plane crash landmark, sites for picnics and for camping, and sweeping views of Pearl Harbor. Long-standing local legend tells forests surrounding the trail play home to the Menehune, a mythological race of little people from Hawaiian tradition, who often reside in the deepest, darkest forests and hidden valleys of the islands, as far away from human settlements as possible. In culture, the Menehune are painted as craftsmen whose expertise are unparalleled by man, and who've been credited in the building of various temples, fish ponds, abodes, roads, and canoes. According to tale, it's believed the Menehune inhabited the islands long before the settlers arrived from Polynesia, and usually emerged at night, during which time they would work on their masterpieces. It was also claimed that if they failed to finish their projects before the sun rose, that they would leave them behind, unoccupied for any who might stumble across them. Additionally, lore dictates that none but their own children and those humans related to the Menehune could behold them, so pretty much to everyone else, they were invisible. According to more specific stories surrounding our Kea'iwa Heiau State Recreation Area, it's rumored the local Menehune are a bit odd in that they appear at all hours of the day and night, some say, due to the plentiful offerings left by those hoping to catch a glimpse of their elusive kind. Number 1. The Petrified Forest National Park. The Petrified Forest National Park, located in Navajo and Apache counties in northeastern Arizona, is a 346 square mile park expanse whose name is derived from its plentiful deposits of petrified wood, that's also recognized for its fossilized trees dating back to the late Triassic epoch, around 225 million years ago. Historically, around 190 million years ago, many of the trees held within park bounds would die, and those visible today were buried in sediment before they could decompose, after which this sediment was covered in volcanic ash, the ash's silica dissolved by creeping water, and the remains infused into the wood's structure itself, effectively transforming it into quartz. Some of the logs held on site are so well preserved through this process, it's still possible to view their bark and growth rings. As far as human habitation, archaeological evidence suggests the earliest parties to reside within park bounds did so over 12,000 years ago, and petroglyphs ranging from 650 to 2,000 years in age can still be viewed to this day. From the 16th through the 18th centuries, travelers through the region searching for routes between Spanish colonies would pass near the forest and would dub it the Painted Desert. In 1853, U.S. Army Lieutenant Emil Whipple would lead a crew to survey a northern portion of the ancient thicket. Between 1857 and 1860, a wagon road was fashioned along the parallel that would experiment with the use of camels as a viable transport option. Later into the 19th century, settlers and private stage companies companies would utilize similar east-west routes, and homesteaders through the region would establish cattle ranches near grasslands, with livestock literally grazing from petrified forest grounds up through the mid-20th century. Through the late 19th century, an increasing interest in the forest's petrified wood would raise red flags amongst locals, and in 1906, the whole of the expanse was designated the Petrified Forest National Monument, offering it ongoing federal protection. Archaeological work of the park was launched through the 20th century, during which time both dinosaur and human artifacts were uncovered. Over the years, its land was developed to include roads, trails, and structures, many of which were fashioned through the 1930s and 40s under the Civilian Conservation Corps, and in 1962, the monument was designated a national park. The Petrified Forest National Park remains open into the present and offers the Painted Desert Inn, the Rainbow Forest Museum, a wealth of petroglyphs and artifacts, and the ruined village of Puerto Pueblo. Over its impossibly lengthy existence, a number of stories tied to the park's bounds have persisted, the first of which pertains to the Painted Desert Inn. Originally constructed in 1924, the Painted Desert would welcome remodels under the CCC from 1937 to 1940, and sadly, in 1953, it would catch fire, resulting in the death of Mrs. Marion Mace, the lodge's manager. While the inn was eventually repaired and reopened to guests, business would rapidly decline following the tragedy, ultimately resulting in its closure in 1963, after which part of the old structure was transformed and reopened as a travel center in 1976. Over the years, the main building of the Painted Desert Inn was rehabilitated and restored, and through the 1990s was reopened as a museum and bookstore. And to date, both staff and visitors frequenting the property have reported disembodied voices and footsteps, phantom wafts of cigarette smoke, and a silhouette most certainly matching that of Mrs. Mace, who was a known chain smoker in life. Another popular and long-standing legend which many may already be familiar with is the rule that if one removes so much as a single stone from the forest, they will most certainly bring upon themselves a curse of insurmountable bad luck. As silly a superstition as this may seem, within the park's visitor center, one can actually view an exhibit filled with what the National Park Service refers to as conscience or apology letters. From the 1940s and onward, these apology letters have been mailed with various stolen stones and pieces of petrified wood back to the forest, in hopes of reversing what many have described as the worst luck one could imagine, bouts of which often involve the deaths of spouses or of various family members, the loss of careers, or severe legal troubles. While most rangers and officials believe this fabled spell of bad luck is nothing more than a self-desire of profession related to guilt, some aren't so certain, and traditional Navajo beliefs actually dictated that so much as touching the frozen wood could lead to a deadly curse. According to some of these beliefs, the petrified wood, or Yeibitsin, were actually bones of the greatest and fiercest of all the Sky People, of a strong and mighty giant by the name of Yaitso, and disturbing his remains was all but begging to incur his unimaginably terrible wrath. Taking its fascinating and ridiculously lengthy history into account, and coupling it with such an impressive slew of purported supernatural infestations and legends spanning the millennia, we felt the Petrified Forest National Park was a perfect choice as this list's most haunted hike in the US. Thanks for joining us for our fourth list of some of the most haunted hikes in the US. If you enjoyed our histories and ghost stories, subscribe to our channel, like this upload, and share us with anyone you think could use a good scare. We'll see you next time.